We're here. I can never tell when we're going. There's nothing that tells me we're moving. So I think we're live. Okay, so if you're sitting here watching me act like an idiot, it's simply because there's a delay between my broadcasting software and when it actually picks up on YouTube. And in the meantime, I have this like 10 seconds of nothing happening where I'm actually getting recorded, but I can't tell it. So please forgive me for that. I apologize. I'm really working on some of the fine-tuning of some of these details. And Ricky has abandoned me today. He showed up a few minutes ago, and I went to get him, and he has disappeared, so I'm almost on my own. I have my niece, who also does YouTube Live, and I have my son's gigantically fat cat who I put on a diet, and so she's lurking around trying to get my attention in hope I will feed her. So it's Lance Emily, Vinci Burger, and myself. So here we go today. Alright, so I'm going off some of your questions. I had some really good ones come in this week. I tried to post a couple of them down on the bottom so that y'all would know ahead of time what we were going to talk about. And one of the first things, and of course, this is, are we in November? Yeah, we're already in November. Thanksgiving, I think, is the 24th this year, and so we've already got some people that are asking about some Thanksgiving questions. And I think one of the biggies that pops up every year is there are almost these arguments over the difference between people who say they prefer yams and the people that say they prefer sweet potatoes. It's perfectly understandable, but it's almost a moot argument because in the United States, anything you get that's a yam and anything you get as a sweet potato is probably going to be the same thing. The chances of you going to a grocery store and buying a true yam, even if it's in the can that says candied yams, is almost non-existent. It's just not going to happen. A true yam is a native from Africa and from Asia, and when we do get them in the United States, most of them come from Africa. However, it's an incredibly rare import. We just don't see them. They are pretty large. They're tuberous. They are white. They're very tough. They take a lot of processing, and they're just not available here. So don't worry about that thing. Now, here's where some of the confusion started. Decades and decades and decades ago, I want to say 100 plus, most of the sweet potatoes in the United States, the what we think of as a sweet potato, most of them were white. And as time passed, different varieties began to be developed with a darker flesh. And I'm going to do a video on this so you can see it better than on my this camera. I can get you some better pictures. But this, can you see that? This is what you're going to think of as a sweet potato or as a yam in the United States. It's going to be both. Now, in my particular supermarket, I was only able to get this particular kind where it's nice and yellow. It's got a deep color. However, you can still, on occasion, find the ones that are white on the inside. You can find them that are yellow, that are deep orange, that are almost true red. You can find them that are purple. There's going to be a huge variety, especially if you are near a local farmer's market or if you're in a larger area than my little hometown where we are lucky to get the one kind of sweet potato. So if you get those, you're going to treat them all the same. It's going to come down to a matter of your personal preference. But this is a sweet potato. And the USDA says that if it's an orange-colored sweet potato, you have to call it a sweet potato. However, there are companies that use other varieties, and they call it candied yams, right? So basically, when it comes down to the difference between a yam and a sweet potato, unless you actually have access to a real honest-to-goodness true yam, don't worry about it, okay? It's not going to matter. Alrighty. That's probably more than you wanted to know about sweet potatoes. One of the other things that I keep getting comments about, and I'm definitely going to shoot a video about this because I went online and I ordered about 6 varieties so that I could sit here and show you exactly what I was talking about. And of course, the box got delayed and it was supposed to be here. I wouldn't be surprised if they knock on the door in the middle of shooting this. But it's salt. Okay, and salt in the past 15 to 20 years has become recognized as such a key ingredient, more so than it ever was in the past. You know, when I was growing up, everybody just said, oh, avoid all the salt, avoid all the salt, avoid all the salt. And we were told not to eat fat, and we were told not to eat salt. And of course, in the past decade, all that nutrition research has been completely stood on its head. We do know, first of all, that if you eat a lot of processed foods, you probably don't need to be adding any additional salt to your diet. You're going to get plenty from that. However, if you're cooking from scratch and cooking at home and you're doing it yourself, you're safe. Don't go panicking and freaking out. You can add a little bit of seasoning, and your food is going to taste so much better. Now, of course, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. Follow his advice. But further than that, we're going to come down to a couple of things. We're also used to regular, oh, Ricky walked through. If I turn this camera around, you could really say hi to YouTube. Ricky just got out of the shower. That's why I couldn't find him. We're all used to the blue box, the Morton's iodized salt box. And decades ago, there was an issue with Americans not getting enough iodine in their diet. They added it to the salt. Problem went away, right? No more goiters. That's what all of us grew up on. However, when salt kind of began to come to the forefront a couple of decades ago, there were a couple of other types of salt that were beginning to get recognized as having a really valuable and separate contribution to American cooking. And I'd say that the grand winner of all of these is kosher salt. That's what I talk about all the time in my videos. If you read one of my recipes or watch one of my videos, I can almost guarantee that I'm going to be using kosher salt. Matter of fact, it's so rare that I have the fine grain table salt that I would probably mention it if I do. Now, I talk about how there is less sodium in kosher salt. That's not really true. It's salt. It's got the same amount of sodium by weight, right? Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Here's what I mean. Because of how finely table salt is ground, you're going to have a lot more concentration in a teaspoon of table salt than you will in a teaspoon of kosher salt, because kosher salt has those great big crystals, right? And you're going to find the same thing if you take a look at pickling salt or canning salt. It's the same principle. Okay, that it's just how large are those salt crystals. Now, if you grind them all down to where it's the same texture and grind as table salt, it's going to have the same amount of sodium in it, right? But I use more kosher salt than I would table salt for that reason. Now, beyond that, we also go into things like sea salt and black salt. Himalayan pink salt has been a big deal recently. I've seen red Hawaiian salts, and I actually ordered some of these so that I could show you. And of course, you know, here we are without fancy salt. But in a nutshell, here's what happens. You go to a location where they have excellent source of some kind of fabulous mineral. So there are volcanic soils in Hawaii, and when they make that sea salt, or when they concentrate that salt, a lot of those minerals stay behind, and it not only colors the salt, but it flavors the salt. And that's what happens with the French gray sea salts. I've seen some beautiful Celtic sea salts, and if you taste them, there are very fine and subtle differences in their flavor. All of them are wonderful. Don't cook with them. You're going to lose the subtlety of flavor if you add it in the beginning. You don't need to do that. And you're also going to spend a lot of money for no reason. That's the difference between a cooking salt, like kosher salt, which has a very pure, clean, unadulterated flavor, and a finishing salt, which has a particular nuance that you add at the end of cooking, right? So you've got cooking salts. That's going to be a plain sea salt. It's going to be your table salt if you have to, and kosher salt. Those are your cooking salts. But then you finish with one of these beautiful products, you know, from all over the world, whichever ones you like. You know, try out all of them. So my final point, or actually I have two questions that are kind of at the end of this. Two questions that I got this week that I wanted to talk about. There have been a lot of studies about how if you season correctly at the beginning of the cooking process, you're actually going to end up using less salt overall than if you wait until the end and try to adjust the seasoning then. It's simply because the food doesn't have the opportunity to absorb those flavors into the food itself while it's cooking, so it's not going to taste right. you're also going to lack a depth of flavor. And that can really throw off how much salt you end up adding. So if you're new to experimenting with salt and you're new to really seasoning your food at the beginning, my recommendation for you is to start your recipes with half of what you think you're going to need, and then taste as you go. I think every single recipe I've ever written has said taste and adjust for seasoning. You season at the beginning, but then you work your way through it. If you season correctly the whole time you're cooking, it's going to taste fabulous at the end, and you won't add anything additional. Now, if you're new, go with half. Make notes. Tell yourself, oh, I did this right, I did that wrong. It's your own personal preference, right? But learning how to season correctly is key. So the last question I got this morning, somebody asked me, what do you do if you oversalt something? And everybody's done it. Matter of fact, I did it yesterday. I got a new batch of stone ground grits, and we were playing with them, and I don't know. I don't know what I did. I don't know if I seasoned it twice. I don't know if one of the kids seasoned it and then I seasoned it, or vice versa. It was so salty, we couldn't eat it. So here's what I did. If you've over-seasoned something, the best thing to do, like if you've got a soup or a sauce or a stew, for a soup, you can add a little additional liquid, or you can remove part of just the broth and leave behind the meat and the veggies, the grains or whatever. Leave that behind and add a little more of your broth or water to stretch out the saltiness. That's a pretty good trick. Sorry about that. Let's see. Another trick is you can add some pasta. That does really well with absorbing the salt. You can add additional ingredients and simply expand your recipe. In effect, like maybe double the batch. Add the other ingredients, although that's kind of like cooking twice, which is no fun. If you have a stew, remove your meat and your veggies or what have you and allow the liquid to drain away. Take a portion of it and add more broth or water or what have you to that portion until you've got the seasonings corrected. A lot of times, however, if you've added too much to a roast or to a poultry or a chop or that kind of thing, if you haven't cooked it yet, you can wipe it off or pat it, rinse it off and pat it dry. But if you've already cooked it, you're kind of stuck. You have to go careful with the seasoning at the beginning, and not overdo it. That's why I say start with a little and then go slowly and work your way up to where you think it's going to be. And actually, I would stop just shy of where you think it should be, because other people in your household may have a different taste profile. My sister is far more sensitive to salt than I am. My daughter is far less sensitive to salt than I am. So stop a little short, and that's where you get to use your finishing salts, right? See, that's win-win. Okay, where'd we get in this list? Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. So, we eat a lot of grains. We do a lot of cream of wheat, we do a lot of grits, we do a lot of oatmeal, a lot of porridge of all kinds. And recently, I was doing, my sister came up to visit, and of course, when she comes to visit, then every dish of our childhood has to come out. And one of the favorite dishes that we had when we were growing up, there was a restaurant downtown in Greenville called Bromley's. A reiteration of it is still there now, by the way. But when I was little, it was an old-style meat and three, and we would walk up after church on Sundays, and one of the best things about it was fried cornmeal mush. I know that sounds horrible, but it's this delicate, creamy, and then they fry it, and it has this crispy crust on the outside, and it was a treat. Well, growing up, Kelly and I, neither one had it again for, 20 years, and then we started trying to recreate it, and found out that neither one of us could create it, which led me to go all obsessive on it and finally figure out what was going on with this stuff, and I got it down. That put me in the position last night of making cornmeal mush. And when my kids came and they were looking at it, they were like, what is this? I looked at them and I said, it's fried polenta. Well, most of them were okay with that because it had an exotic name, and so they ate it. They loved it. It was delicious. And I've seen fried polenta on menus all over the place, and they charge a lot of money for that. So what's the difference? What is the difference between polenta and grits and the types of cornmeal and that sort of thing? Well, in a nutshell, nothing. That's the basic answer. There is no difference between grits and polenta, except if they call it polenta, they can charge 10 times as much money for it. Now, drilling down into that a little deeper, that's not exactly true. Polenta is a dish, and it's made from a medium or coarse ground cornmeal, and it has very specific preparation, and it's done beautifully, and it's specific to certain regions of Italy, and it's gorgeous. Love polenta. Grits are also prepared from a medium to coarse ground cornmeal. And in the United States, they came to be two types of grits. There were yellow and there were white grits, just as there was yellow and there was white cornmeal. Now, the preferred, and this is what I made last night, this is what I got yesterday, are stone ground grits. I think the taste is far superior. That has not been ground down to a meal, so it's not a corn meal like you would make cornbread out of. And because it is a rougher grind, it takes longer to cook, which is why you can make a cornmeal mush, like I made yesterday with my stone ground cornmeal. You can make that in a few minutes, but if you make stone ground grits, you're going to have to cook it for about 20 minutes to get the right consistency, right? So both of them are made with the same basic ingredients. Very specifically, if you want to make a very authentic Italian polenta, you need to go look for, I think it's called otofile. I'm not sure if I've got my Italian right. I think that's what it's called. You want to go look for that particular type of stone ground cornmeal preparation, and that's what you're going to use in an authentic Italian polenta preparation. In the United States, you want to look for stone ground yellow or white cornmeal, and you're going to get fabulous results, right? Now, again, with polenta, you might use chicken broth, you might use white wine. I'm not sure if they use cream or not until they finish, but I've seen it done with cheeses, and of course, sauteed onions or mushrooms or shallots and garlic and all kinds. It all depends on the recipe. In the U.S., of course, we do shrimp and grits, and that preparation is done either with milk and water or milk and chicken broth or some combination. There we go. And we use cheddar, and they don't use cheddar. They use Parm or Pecorino. But at the heart of the matter, you're still talking about a stone ground, medium to coarse cornmeal that you simmer in a liquid until it is rich and creamy. See? There you go. Grits or polenta. Buy grits and don't spend as much money. That's what it really comes down to. Okay, I think we got our questions today. We will be back next Monday at noon. In the meantime, I've got a couple questions that have already come in for next week, and Ricky's not here, so we can all yell at Ricky, so I can't answer them live right this second. This is exciting. Check this out. Can you see? My cookbooks are here. We got hard copies this time. These are in the Kindle store. Pretty sure they're both there. I got my copies. I'm not sure if I did something tricky. But ground beef recipes. Oh, I'm not supposed to hide the title. Ground beef recipes. And the other one is the Happier Holidays Cookbook, How to Eat, Drink, and Stay Merry. And it is the 7th of November. So we're coming up on peak time for that book. It will take all the stress out of your holidays. Go find us on Facebook and on Pinterest and on Twitter. We have a Patreon page now. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing appearances at WJHL in Johnson City and at WKPT in Kingsport, where I've got a regular gig going on now. And in the meantime, I've got a few more videos to shoot when we're not live. I'll show you all about the salt. I'll probably pull out the cornmeal thing and show you that too. It's Thanksgiving, y'all. We're going to be doing some cooking. Okay. If you like this, give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I will see you definitely next week and a few times in between.